Hey, welcome to the Mind Hacking Happiness Podcast, episode 4. I am Sean Webb. So today we're going to bring you an interview, one of the interviews that I promised that I would bring to you intermittently in between some of the stuff that I want to share with you. Today's interview is with the host of another podcast named Buddha at the Gas Pump, BATGAP for short, BATGAP, and you could find it at batgap.com. Rick Archer is a friend of mine now who I met a number of years back. We actually recorded this interview probably a year and a half ago or a little longer before he had mentioned a couple of guests that he's already since interviewed and before I had since attended Science and Non-Duality, which I've now spoken at and plan to hopefully attend and speak at again later this year. And so it was a interview that we had in the can for a while that I knew I was going to use with this podcast specifically because I knew that we were firing up this podcast in connection with the success of the Mind Hacking Happiness books and that they're transforming people's lives, etc. I knew we were going to do this, so I wanted to get that done because Rick is usually the interviewer. BATGAP is a podcast that interviews spiritually awakening people, and he discusses all kinds of cool topics connected with consciousness expansion, etc. He used to be a transcendental meditation teacher for a number of decades, which he's not anymore. But he's built a huge following in the consciousness expansion space and the consciousness exploration space regarding interviewing some really cool folks on his show. And I thought, well, why not turn the tables on Rick and interview him one time and find out his thoughts and opinions on stuff. And so we did that, and it was an amazing conversation. I had a lot of fun with it. I consider it to be one of the best conversations on consciousness that I've had in the last couple of years, probably, or if not longer. So enjoy this, and with no further ado, here's Rick Archer.
When you die, on your deathbed, you will receive total consciousness.
People say a science of consciousness is impossible. I think that we may need one or two ideas that initially seem crazy before we can come to grips with consciousness.
Gunga.
All right, so today we have on the line Rick Archer from BATGAP, and that stands for Buddha at the Gas Pump. And I met Rick a number of years ago and thought he was a really interesting guy and wanted to get him on as a guest to talk about some of the consciousness expansion stuff that we are focusing on here at Mind Hacking Happiness. And welcome, Rick.
Thank you, Sean. I appreciate it. Nice to connect with you again.
Yeah, we're turning the tables on you because usually you're the interviewer and not the interviewee.
Yeah, I can just relax.
Awesome. So the last time I saw you was, I don't know, probably just 5 or 6 years ago, something like that, down in Huntersville, but you were doing a little weekend retreat type of thing.
Yep.
How'd that go?
It was good. Francis Bennett and I, he came down. We had never met in person, and we just sort of felt like doing something together. He was already set up to do it, and I kind of invited myself. I said, how would you like me to come too? It was fun. It was a little bit discombobulated and informal and a little disorganized, but we got to know each other, and people had a good time, and I always like a little adventure, so yeah. I was happy to do it.
So that was part of your spiritual path, but kind of after you made the transition to teaching mode, what got you onto like consciousness expansion or discovery of more internal stuff? Like when did that whole path start for you?
Yeah, well, actually that thing with Francis was just a blip because I haven't been in teaching mode for a long time. I was a transcendental meditation teacher for 25 years, starting in 1970, and did a lot of teaching and lecturing and radio interviews and so on. Then I just kind of got out of that, but I just felt like having a little weekend. But my path started in the late 60s. I first heard about enlightenment in 1967 and got kind of excited about it and realized that in some foggy, 60-ish way that's what I really wanted to do in life. And, went on taking various drugs for a year and then finally decided that wasn't going to do it for me, and I was just going to ruin my life if I kept up on that track. So I decided to stop taking drugs and learn transcendental meditation, which I did. And it was very effective for me from the start. And as I said, I became a teacher of it, and my life really changed profoundly. And I've been doing a form of that ever since, although I'm no longer in the TM movement. But I've probably sat in meditation 6 or 7 years if you add it all up. And they were years well spent. In other words, if you add up all the bits of time, it's probably that long of my life.
Right. So you're up in Iowa where there's a big TM crowd up there, right?
Yes.
Wow. Okay, so there's
a university here.
Wow, excellent. So what got you into doing interviews with consciousness expansion folks? Like, what got BATGAP started?
Well, the idea just popped into my head, and I was actually out in the garage working out on a Bowflex machine, listening to Adyashanti, and for some reason the idea just dawned on me. I should do interviews, you know? I mean, I guess I was aware of other people doing interviews, and there were a few things in those days, the Urban Guru Cafe, and Richard Miller might have been doing them, and I just had this impulse, and it was one of those aha things that wouldn't go away. And my concept initially was rather limited. I thought I was going to just start doing them at the local radio station, and starting with people who lived in town, and then maybe getting others on the phone and videotaping it. And I wasn't getting any support for that. The radio station wasn't interested, and friends started saying, "Hey, you're thinking too small. Get it out on the internet. Start doing it." They kept egging me on, and in fact, it was a friend who came up with the term "Buddha at the gas pump." I was going to call it awakenings or something. If you go on BATGAP.com in the very first interview, that's what I'm calling it at the radio station. It was a demo we did, but it was tailor-made for me. I've been, on the spiritual path since I was a teenager. And I'm always interested in the kinds of things we talk about on Buddha at the Gas Pump. And I have an avid curiosity. I can talk to anybody about anything. I sometimes say I could interview the garbage man for an hour and, not run out of questions to ask him about his profession or something. So it just felt right. And finally I kind of got it together, and it's been growing in terms of technological sophistication and clarity of the recordings and all. But I really feel like I'm in my groove, and this is something that I've been preparing for all my life, and it's a way that I can serve. I always, cut me off if I'm too long-winded, because I tend to be. But I have this distinct sense, and I've had it at varying times in my life, that we're all instruments of the divine, and I believe there is a divine. We can elaborate on what that means, but that I just really want to be of service. I want to do something that's going to help enlighten the world, to put it in simple terms. It's going to help bring in a better age. And this is something I can do, and that seems to have struck a chord with a lot of people. So it's very gratifying to be doing it and to get the lovely feedback I get from people.
Yeah, I think
as we go along.
I get that motivation a lot. I mean, I understand it in that, because that's kind of the reason that we're starting this whole mind hacking happiness thing, is that we want to spread consciousness. We want to spread happiness, if you will. We want to spread kind of an internal spirituality, or an internal discovering of the thing, the other, the stuff that exists underneath the whole big, illusion of the mind that exists until that one day. And so exploring that, finding that place within you that uncovers stuff that was in there that you're like, whoa, hold on a second. What's going on that I didn't understand was in here before, but it's coming from within me, so it must be real. It must have some basis in reality. There's some type of information there that's being conveyed. How do I find that? Because it's making my life awesome, right? And I want to be able to spread that kind of stuff, so I can identify with that motivation that you have to spread consciousness, or to spread enlightenment, so to speak.
And I feel like it's a group effort. There's no competitiveness in this. In fact, I have a page on BATGAP.com that says similar shows, and I list dozens of various kinds of spiritual interview shows. And the internet's a free place. People can always watch my thing or leave it and watch something else. And I actually am happy to help them if they want to find other voices and other flavors of this kind of discussion. And I'll add your show to that page.
Oh, thanks, man.
But I just feel like we're all one big team. Yeah. And you need a shortstop, and you need a first baseman, you need an outfielder, and each has its function. And I was rooting for you have a Detroit Tigers hat on. I was in Detroit in 1984 when they went 35-5 for their first 40 games and won the World Series. Stayed in first place the entire season.
Oh yeah, my grandma loved that season. I'm kind of a Cubs fan. I'm wearing this hat in honor of my grandma. It's nearing her birthday, so I was like, all right, I got to wear the Detroit cap for a little while because I'm from Michigan. So I mean, we switched loyalties from Detroit to Chicago. We're like kind of in the middle. But so you've interviewed like a whole bunch of folks in this consciousness expansion or spirituality space, like, you know, and I see that you're open to discussing anything with anyone, because for the folks who haven't explored your show yet, you talk to the folks who I consider to be like on the very extreme of like almost clearly enlightened. And then on the other end, there's like some questionable stuff of like, well, okay, we're channeling people from Venus, or, you know, not exactly that, but, you know, that type of open exploration of consciousness and things that come from the mind. Why such the wide variety? Is it just I need more folks every week, or is it just an openness to explore whatever exists?
It's an openness, and I have my limits, but I kind of feel like the universe is a vast, mysterious, multifarious thing. And if you look at nature itself, look at the abundance of variety and diversity. Look at the rainforest, look at the Antarctic, and look at just life everywhere. There's at every level, macroscopic, microscopic. There's just this huge explosion of creativity and, flourishing of life in so many different varieties and forms. And I feel like that's a reflection of the nature of the Creator, the nature of God. And I feel that same tendency applies in the spiritual realm. That God is not a one-trick pony, so to speak, offering only, every fundamentalist feels that their particular thing is the only thing or the best thing or whatever. I just don't feel it works that way. I just feel that, as much as there's a diversity of people in this world, there's a diversity of paths to God. And you could almost say there are 7 billion paths to God because there are 7 billion people. Now, there's all kinds of New Age woo-woo kind of stuff that I could do endless numbers of shows about, and people claiming to channel Saint Germain and this and that, some of whom actually may be, perhaps others of whom I think are just phonies. We do have some discrimination.
Where is your line? Where is your line on that?
I think if people are genuine, authentic, and if what they have to say indicates to me, for instance, I interviewed this lady, and it was a couple actually, who have had some very apparently real experiences with extraterrestrials, and for decades I've felt that from things I've read and experienced and people I've talked to that there are sort of extraterrestrial life forms that actually are playing a role in the enlightenment of our planet and perhaps other planets. And so I wouldn't want to make the show all about that,
Sure.
but I wanted to touch on it. And then I've interviewed a couple of channelers. And, you can take them or leave them, although one of them, Bashar or Daryl Anka, is one of my most popular shows. But I kind of am intrigued by the notion. Well, let me just tell you a story to explain what I'm about to say.
Sure.
If extraterrestrials were to land on the White House lawn, it would be huge news.
Right.
Because we'd realize, there's other life in the universe, other intelligent life, and they're here among us now. Well, I feel that creation it has a range from gross to subtle. And perhaps this is only a metaphor, but just as in science, we only perceive about 4% of creation and the rest of it is dark matter and dark energy, and we don't know what those are. Right. I feel that the sort of the gross level of perception, which is people's customary level of experience, is just the crust, the surface of the ocean, and that there are many, many, many subtle layers or realms, in words like astral, celestial, and so on. And those realms are populated with beings of various sorts, some of whom might be useful and evolutionary to commune with, others not. But the fact that most people are oblivious to the fact that to the idea that there is even such a thing, and yet such beings are intermingled with us, is intriguing. It's ironic, and so I just want it would again. It wouldn't be like a main theme which I'd hit on every week, but every now and then I have a guest who has that sort of experience, routinely even.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. It's interesting to throw it out there just to kind of broaden people's perspective on the way life works.
Yeah, those things interest me. I mean, on one, there's two sides of my brain that like to weigh in on that kind of stuff when I hear about communing with aliens and astral interaction, stuff like that. It's like, okay, one, there's the side of, oh yeah, that's all bullshit, that type of thing. And then the other side is, okay, the mathematical certainty that intelligent life exists in other places in the universe is certain. I mean, there is no potential that it doesn't in a universe as large and complex as ours, even if it's not infinite. If it's infinite, then, there's a certainty that life exists, and there's a certainty that it has visited Earth in a eternal universe. So then there's that whole other side of the science saying, yeah, but, the likelihood is good that kind of stuff exists. And then going into the discussion on the astral stuff, it's like, oh, those are woo-woo folks. But then on the other side, from the scientific perspective, there are a number of dimensions that exist that we don't see and don't interact with. And consciousness, right, this big C word, comes from somewhere, and it's definitely connected to this thing, the science that we call quantum physics, right? And it permeates absolutely everything through all space and time, backwards and forwards. And the quantum field is that thing that just goes everywhere at all times, and that's the one thing that has been inextricably connected with consciousness. There's one interpretation of quantum physics that doesn't include consciousness. So then it's like, well, maybe these consciousnesses or these entities or these, intelligences do exist somewhere that we just can't put our finger on yet because we're living in this three-dimensional existence and we're trying to measure everything. So it's like, I get both sides of the argument in my head going when I hear that kind of stuff. It's like, okay, are we really channeling people from Venus, or are there really, is there really some kind of an intelligence there in another type of dimension that we're simply just not attuned to get on a regular basis, to tune into? And maybe some people have a physiological aptitude for being able to tune into that, because I mean, they do.
And most of the spiritual traditions of the world talk about this stuff and have iconography about it and so on. So it does go back through history, through all the different cultures, Also, just to put this particular point in context, imagine there's a territory, and you don't own the territory. It's like a foreign territory, and it has all kinds of interesting things in it. There's a diamond mine over here and a gold mine over there, and all kinds of fascinating things that you might like to explore and mine. But again, it's not your territory, but there's a fort that commands the territory.
Yeah.
Now, if you were to capture the fort, then it becomes your territory, and you're at liberty to explore all the different things that are in it. Whereas if you just go after this mine or that mine, you're kind of on shaky ground.
Yeah.
So that fort in this metaphor is the self, pure consciousness, pure awareness, the ground state of natural law. And then there are more manifest levels at which these phenomena we're discussing exist. So it's fascinating to ponder them and to consider them, but don't let them be your primary focus.
Right.
Focus primarily on capturing the fort, and be open to the possibility that all these realities exist. But that should be the main priority.
Yeah.
And if other things are like icing on the cake.
Sure. And one of the interesting things that I think is starting to draw this spirituality and science together was that discovery in 2014 in Tsukuba, Japan, that showed that our microtubules in our brain, like everybody's on this kick of, all this stuff is woo-woo and it's all in the mind and it's just an invention of the brain and it's yada, yada, yada. But now, they've proven in the materials labs in Tsukuba that our microtubules that make up the walls of our neurons interact with quantum vibrations from the quantum field. So then it's like, okay, all bets are off now. It's like, okay, a ton of information could be being passed both to and from our mind into the quantum field that goes backwards and forwards in time and all throughout space and time infinitely, right? If the universe exists, the quantum field is there because the quantum field is creating the materialist, planets and yada, yada, yada that exist, the suns and the planets and the physics and yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
So it's like, wow, maybe there's a scientific basis for all this previously woo-woo stuff where, the materialist reductionists are always like, well, if the electrons, aren't transferred, then it's not happening. It's like, well, science is kind of disproving that, or at least proving the possibility that it could be real.
Yeah, there's so many things. I've been watching this thing on the National Geographic Channel about Einstein, and scientists were ridiculed for believing that atoms and molecules exist back in Einstein's lifetime.
Right.
And then he proved that they do exist, or at least molecules, through Brownian motion and so on. So, I mean, you can go back to any point you want in the history of thought, and there are always going to be people who say it's only this, or it couldn't be that, or whatever. And, while you don't want to just be gullible and accept everything as true,
right,
you should at least accept everything as a working hypothesis.
Sure.
Sure. And if somebody says angels exist, don't say couldn't possibly exist because whatever. It's like, all right, let's take that as a working hypothesis, and maybe there can be some way it can be proven or disproven. Everything is a working hypothesis.
Now, do you consider yourself someone who keeps a foot in both boats of like spirituality and science, or do you lean to one side? Where's your position?
I love the juxtaposition of them. I don't have a formal training in science whatsoever. I'm much more, I'd say, in training in spirituality. But I think the juxtaposition is exciting. I'm going to interview somebody in a week or two named Jude Curavan, who has had all kinds of amazing, mystical, profound experiences, and also has a degree from Oxford in quantum mechanics and cosmology. I love talking to that kind of person who bridges those worlds.
Wow.
And I feel like, I think that science and spirituality have a lot to offer one another. Science can help spirituality become more rigorous, more systematic, more evidence-based, less woo-woo and imaginative, less hung up on belief and all kinds of fictional nonsense, and which has resulted in plenty of wars throughout history. Right. And on the other hand, spirituality can bring to science a tool, an instrumentality, primarily in the form of the human mind and nervous system, through which much subtler realms can be explored. I mean, if you think about it, a single cell is more complex than the Large Hadron Collider. And, our collection of 100 trillion of them that we call the human body and brain is a marvelous instrument. And I think that yogis and mystics and the like have used this instrument scientifically, which is to say, experientially over the millennia, to explore realms of existence, realms of reality that many scientists reject as preposterous, and even the scientists who take it as potentially real haven't yet begun to explore and don't have the tools to explore. So I tend to give long-winded answers.
No. I'm just thinking you're gonna love my second book because it talks exactly about that kind of stuff, about the complexity of the human body and how it can be wired into the whole system. So on that tack, I've seen a propensity or kind of a trend of science and spirituality kind of merging towards each other. Like one of my favorite authors is actually an atheist, Sam Harris. I don't know if you know. Oh,
I love Sam Harris. I've read some of his books. I listened to his podcast. I've tried to get him on the show. He says he's thinking about it.
Awesome. Well, I love his approach to discussing these things that we typically classify as spiritual, in air quotes, and but doing so from a perspective with a scientific eye, right? And as a trained scientist, I think he brings a lot of good, a lot of good things to the boat, a lot of good things to the discussion on, discussing, not just abandoning this whole expansion of consciousness thing, because we don't even understand what consciousness is from a scientific perspective, but to say, okay, let's talk about what consciousness is from a scientific perspective, and not just throw all these things out with the, baby with the bathwater, saying it's all woo-woo, that type of stuff. Do you think that is a tidal wave, or do you think it's just kind of a momentum trend that'll shift the other way? Do you think, a merging of science and spirituality, for lack of a better word, is our future, or do you think this is just a flash in the pan?
I think it's our future, and hopefully within our lifetimes we'll see it grow much more than it already has. And I think that it needs to be our future. It needs to grow because I think that the sort of the life-threatening problems that beset us, in terms of climate and population and various other factors, any one of which could wipe us all out, are just symptomatic of a lack of attunement with or connection with deeper values, which you might call spiritual, and that we've mastered the laws of nature superficially on a material level, but modern technologies have not caught up with what Einstein and Planck and Niels Bohr and the others discovered 100 years ago, which they all thought about consciousness and considered consciousness primary. And so I think that when modern technologies and the culture as a whole do catch up with that understanding, we'll find that many of the intractable problems which plague us will find solutions.
Yeah.
They may be technological solutions, or they may actually be they might just begin to dissipate as humans understand the world differently and behave differently. But in any case, everything that we see as the quality of our society, politics, economics, technological things, environmental things, they're all just reflections of the state of our consciousness as human beings collectively.
Right.
And so if we want to change the world, we need to change ourselves. And, and the most fundamental and profound change you can make is a shift in consciousness, to higher consciousness. And I'll just throw in one little quote that I heard this morning from Desmond Tutu. He said, "If you think that one individual can't make a difference, spend the night in a room with a mosquito." Meaning, if you think you're too small to make a difference, hang out with a mosquito in a room.
That's awesome. Now, you've been to a few conferences, like one I know in particular is like Science and Duality, or Science and Non-Duality,
yeah.
Right. Do you think that's that trend is growing? You think they're making an impact? You've been there. I haven't yet. I want to go. It's on the bucket list, and I plan to probably be a regular attendee here in the near future. What are your takes on those types of things?
I love that gathering. It's a real hodgepodge of people, all kinds. I mean, you see Sufis walking around, and you see well-known people like Deepak Chopra and Rupert Spira and others, and all kinds of other people. And it's just this nice mingling and gathering of people who are fascinated with the kinds of things you and I are talking about today. And there are all kinds of presentations, and some of them are plenary sessions where everybody's together in one big room and Deepak is speaking or something, and Adyashanti or somebody, and other ones are sort of like, when I gave a talk last year, there were like 17 other things people could go to in the same time slot. So it's like that. It breaks up into smaller groups, bigger groups. But it's a great atmosphere, and you get to mingle with all kinds of interesting people and, meet people and make connections. And also, I just really enjoy the whole premise of the conference and the actual conference itself. I've been to, I think this will be my 8th year this year.
You think they're making an impact?
Sure. I mean, it's not like earth-changing, but it's just one more engine on the train. One more. It's stimulating. It's just one more way in which this whole global network of spiritually awakening people can mutually enrich one another.
Right. Now, you've done like hundreds of interviews with those types of folks that walk around that conference and focus on this type of an expansion of consciousness. Who has struck you as being the most on point, or the most resonates the most with you? I mean, really is the question that I'm asking, because we all have our different perspectives, and there's going to be the folks who resonate with the people who channel aliens from Venus, but who, from your perspective, has struck you as being, wow, this guy's got it, or this girl's got it?
I'll try not to name names too much, but maybe I'll name a few. But it's like, well, just give you a principle, which is that just because somebody's famous doesn't necessarily mean they are the most sort of profoundly awakened or something. There can be, people who gain quite a following who, could be rather disingenuous or have a sort of some skeletons in the closet that they don't want the rest of the world to know about, and so on, or who have a lot of charisma, but that charisma could even be a form of narcissistic personality disorder or something. Right. And I've actually taken some interviews down because I've learned troubling things about what some people are doing. Whereas there can be somebody who's very simple, who really doesn't have much of a following, who can be profoundly awakened. And they just don't have the kind of personality that is flashy or that attracts a big following.
Yeah.
But what I look for and what I appreciate most are authenticity, integrity, intelligence, and authenticity would also mean not trying to present yourself as something you're not or as more than you are.
Right.
Not being afraid to sort of display a few warts and blemishes.
Yeah. Sure, right, sure.
that kind of thing. And and one of the subtitle of Buddha at the Gas Pump is Interviews with Ordinary Spiritually Awakening People.
Yeah.
So, we don't try to keep getting the most famous people that we can manage to get, although sometimes those people are great and they really have a lot to say.
Sure.
It's also nice to interview the housewife who just happens to have had a profound awakening and is able to present it well. And when you do that, other housewives and basic, ordinary, so-called ordinary people listen to that and think, whoa, if it's possible for them, it must be possible for me,
Yeah, what do you think it is? Where do you think that stuff comes from? Like, we all start life, we grow up through elementary school or depending on your culture, wherever you grow up, as a regular human being, and, we're handed this idea of self from a very early age, and we grow up inside of that. And then all of a sudden, for some people, and a lot of folks this doesn't happen, but for some people, there comes this epiphany or this process of extra information that is then, but it comes from within. It doesn't come from a book. It comes from something inside of us. What is that? What do you think that the commonality is for the folks that you've talked to? And where does that come from, do you think?
Well, my view of things is that spiritual development or spiritual evolution is a long-term project.
Okay.
It's not confined to one lifetime.
Right.
And that there's a vast range of possibilities, possible unfoldment, that there are beings in this universe who are beyond our imagination in terms of the level of their spiritual development. And in fact, there's a thing somewhere in the Vedic literature that says that there are like 16 kalas, they call it, and each kala represents a level of evolution. And human life is said to occupy the 4th through the 8th kalas. So somebody like Ramana Maharshi might be in kala 8, but then there's like 8 more above that. And I don't know if that's true or not, but I kind of tend to feel that, and many people I speak to, whom I respect a lot, they feel too that it never ends. There's this ongoing evolution, and never hang up your laurels or consider yourself done. So when somebody has a sudden awakening and they hadn't even been looking for it, they weren't on any kind of spiritual path, I attribute that to past life development. They've been practitioners in the past, and it's even in the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna asked Lord Krishna, "Well, what if a person dies before they get enlightened? Does he not perish like a broken cloud?" And Krishna said basically, "Well, no, they just get a new body and pick up where they left off."
Wow. Okay, so now that intrigues me, because I understand that, again, that ties into a lot of the Hindu beliefs in reincarnation and things like that, or the Eastern beliefs. There are more than one religion believes in that. But doesn't that stink of a duality there for a moment, in that there's a separation that says, okay, my spiritual existence, let's say, I go beyond this body and I go through multiple lives. does not that suggest there is some sort of separation there, that I get another, that me, the spiritual existence of me, maybe not this version of me with my mind and my ideas and, my access to this technology and yada, yada, yada. But isn't that some sort of separation that then says I am not one with everything? How do we reconcile that?
I was smiling because I was thinking of the hot dog joke about getting one with everything, what the Buddhist monk says to the hot dog vendor, right? and then the hot dog vendor, the Buddhist monk gives him a 20 and he doesn't get any change back. And the Buddhist monk says, where's my change? And the hot dog vendor says, change has to come from within. But anyway, there's a level at which we're never born and we never die, and we never grow, or we never progress or regress or anything else, and that's the universal self.
Right.
It's unbounded being.
Right.
But then there's also levels of relative expression, and they may not be the ultimate reality or ultimately real or anything else. Vedic terminology uses the term mithya, which means dependent reality, and they use the example of a pot. There are so many different kinds of pots, and they all have different appearances and different functions, but they're all essentially clay. So there's really only clay appearing as different kinds of pots.
Right.
And some pots might be more beautiful and more big or whatever. But in any case, we have a physical body, flesh, blood, and bones, and it goes through changes. We also have a subtle body, and that subtle body doesn't die when the physical body dies. It carries on. And there's some sort of an essence, something which constitutes our individual soul or being or vehicle, and that's the thing that gets born into new physical bodies. And so that sort of reconciles the idea of how we could continue to grow, and and in the meanwhile, having said that, ultimately we were never born. There is no subtle body. There's no physical universe. It's
Right.
all just the unmanifest appearing to be manifest. But if you want to talk at all about anything, you can comfortably straddle both worlds,
Right.
and talk about all kinds of possibilities in the manifest creation, while in the same breath acknowledging that ultimately it's all just unmanifest and nothing ever happened.
Yeah, it's there's a paradox there, that I think is just spirituality or consciousness period is just full of paradoxes.
It is. I even have a T-shirt that says paradox on it.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I mean that's very parallel to the argument that you can't be a spiritual teacher and say even one word, because let's say you want to teach somebody about non-duality. Well, at the point that you're even saying one word, your mind is attached to an idea that it then needs to defend speaking that one word, whether it's an answer, a yes or no answer, or whether it's stop. If you're the teacher seeing someone being beaten or whatever it is, there has to be an attachment of the mind, at which point, boom, you're separated. The big thick black curtain comes down between you and the universe, and all of a sudden you're defending the existence that exists within your body, within your mind, that type of thing. It's the huge paradox of this whole consciousness movement, this whole spirituality movement of you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. I mean, you're proposing spreading this message of consciousness and love and unconditional existence and being what is, and then all of a sudden you have to say something to someone and the whole thing comes tumbling down.
If I had to define enlightenment, it would be mastering multidimensionality. If I could define it in 2 words. And what that means is being able to encompass in one's awareness the whole range from unmanifest through all the various levels of manifestation,
right,
and to function as necessary or as appropriate at each level. So, on one level, there are problems. There are starving children. There are pollution, all that stuff. It needs to be dealt with. We don't just say, oh, it's all unreal. We don't have to do anything. On another level, all is well and wisely put. It's all the divine play. Everything is perfect just as it is. On another level, nothing ever happened. It's all unmanifest. There is no creation. Nothing ever arose. And the appearance that it did so is an illusion. But none of those levels can be taken refuge in to the exclusion of the others without causing problems and without living an incomplete or an unbalanced life.
Right.
And real embodiment or awakening or enlightenment involves, to my understanding, the mastery of the whole gamut. Being able to experience and understand and operate in the full range of creation as a living entity.
Understanding it and integrating it, would that be fair?
Yeah, integrating it, living it, being able to, pay the rent and say hi to the angels and sit in the transcendent and, whatever is called for.
So if you had to pick one of your favorite interviews that embodies that, who do you think that would be? Or who would you love to, who have not you interviewed that you would love to interview that you think may have that?
To name a well-known person, I think Adyashanti's pretty good at that. He's a regular guy in many respects, but very highly awakened, and just really articulate and clear. Also likes to play poker, likes to listen to Frank Sinatra, likes to go mountain biking and dirt biking out in the desert, and just sort of has. And that's one reason people like him, and he's very genuine. That he's very genuine. He's just kind of like doesn't put on airs.
Yeah.
And incorporates. On the other hand, he acknowledges that he doesn't have any sort of celestial experience, or he's had that sort of thing, just sort of experience with subtle realms and all. But he said that he kind of opted out of that when he came into this life. It's not something he really wanted to do. So it's maybe not part of his repertoire, and I don't know that it necessarily is part of everyone's repertoire. So that's just an example that people will have heard of. Mm-hmm. There's other people I really like a lot who have become good friends who I like because they're real, they're genuine, they're honest, they that kind of thing.
Yeah. So what's the future for BATGAP? How long are you going to do this?
Oh, as long as I can do a good job at it, as long as I'm coherent and clear enough. I'm 67 years old. I could see myself doing it theoretically another 20 years if I take good care of myself, and which I tend to do. I exercise, I eat well, I sleep well, I meditate, and do all that good stuff. And so I just really enjoy it. I don't feel like there's any chance I'm going to get bored with it anytime soon.
Yeah.
You got to do something. I don't want to just sort of sit around and weed the garden. It's just something that I love, and as long as I am useful with it, and I might even bequeath it to somebody at some point, somebody younger who I feel would do a good job with it, so that it can carry on.
Now, where is our success measure, if we can put one into place? Where do we measure getting people to a deeper consciousness? Where is that? Hey, where's that tipping point, so to speak? Is there one? Are we on our way to somewhere doing something, or is helping one person at a time enough?
Who's we? You and I?
Well,
or the whole
we,
world,
everybody on our team, everybody on the consciousness expansion team, right? Everybody who's out there saying, look within for a deeper truth. Don't believe the television medias that are telling you who and what you are, and don't believe the society existence that's trying to form you into a label or a mold or a subset of a grouping of labels. Where is our success coming from?
Well, Thich Nhat Hanh said, the next Buddha may be the Sangha, and Sangha means kind of a collection of seekers or enlightened souls, or would-be enlightened souls. And I think that we could define the Sangha in this context as the sort of the global web of people who are awakening and interested in awakening, and just sort of kind of just getting fascinated with spirituality and pursuing it through various means. So I would say if we want to, if that is really sort of the hope for humanity, then I suppose our success will come if we don't, if we manage to reverse the very dangerous trends that we see in the world and turn it around and usher in a more enlightened age. And I am optimistic that will happen. it could get a lot worse before it gets better, or at least apparently worse. There's a lot of stuff that could crumble, which probably doesn't deserve to exist in a more enlightened world. But I think it's accelerating, it's quickening. More and more people. I mean, I talk to people who are having Kundalini awakenings, who weren't ever even interested in. I mean, there's this one guy I've been in touch with. He says, I just like watching football and having a beer, and all of a sudden I'm having this Kundalini awakening. I can't work anymore. What's going on? Get me out of this. So I think that there's some kind of a groundswell taking place in world consciousness, and people are being carried along with it, whether they like it or not. I think the more one consciously participates in it and collaborates or cooperates with it, the easier it'll be for a person. If a person is really pushing in the other direction and digging in their heels and holding on to sort of antiquated, outmoded ways of functioning, it can be more difficult for them because everything they're holding on to could be taken from them, could be pulled out from under them. Did I answer your question?
You did. Wow, that's great. Rick, I think we're going to leave it there. I want to thank you for doing this little section with us, this little interview. And I'm sorry to turn that around on you and make you the interviewee. You're
really fun.
Yeah, you're a great interviewer. I appreciate what you do, and I appreciate your podcasts and stuff that you put out. But thanks for spending the time for us today.
Oh, you're welcome. I've really enjoyed it, and sorry if I talk too much. I have a tendency to run off at the mouth once I get started. I don't know where this stuff comes from even. I just keep coming out with it.
Well, it comes through us, not from us, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. But it's really fun, and I appreciate you inviting me on, and good luck with your podcast. I'll link to it from BATGAP.com.
Thanks. And for our viewers, I definitely encourage you guys to go check out BATGAP. He has a ton of interesting interviews with enlightened folks and some who are on their way towards enlightenment, and but that's kind of the path that we're all on. So
I'll leave you with a Sufi quote. I forget who said this, but there's an end to the path to God, but there's no end to the path in God.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Rick.
Thank you.
Okay, so there it is, and we'll just let that stand as it is, as beautiful as it is. If you'd like to check out an interview that Rick did with me as a guest, you can go to BATGAP.com and search for me, and you'll find my interview with Rick at one of the SAND conferences that we went to, and that sold a lot of books afterwards for me. I guess it represented what I had written about well. And if you want to get a free copy of my books, just please know that you can do so by going to mindhackinghappiness.com/free book, which will bring you to a landing page at Audible. And if you don't have an Audible subscription, you can sign up for free and get a free copy, which you can then keep regardless of whether you continue your subscription or not. I've been a member of Audible since 2006, so we're going on 13 years now. It's a monthly expense that I will never cease. I will be begging for money on the streets if I need to pay for my Audible subscription because it is so awesome. The books are read to you by the authors themselves. I read my own book. I'm told did a pretty good job. I don't know. We'll see. You tell me. Anyway, check it out. mindhackinghappiness.com/free book, and you can get a free copy of Mind Hacking Happiness Volume 1. Which will tell you about your human mind and how it operates so that you can take control of it, or Volume 2, which will tell you the synopsis of Volume 1 in the first chapter, and then dig deep into spiritual awakening or enlightenment, all of that ancient, cool, ooey gooey stuff that no one's really explained from a scientific perspective, because we do keep our foot in one foot in each boat, spirituality and science, to try to draw those two together so we don't wind up in the drink. All right. Hope this message finds you well. Love you guys. Talk to you soon. Peace.
Gung